Welcome back to the podcast. Today we're diving into one of the most important shifts happening in Singapore's property market. And surprisingly, most buyers still don't fully understand what has changed. Because on the surface, Singapore property still looks familiar. People are buying HDBs. People are upgrading to condos. New launches continue to attract huge crowds. Property prices remain resilient. Everything appears normal. But underneath the surface, the rules of the game have fundamentally changed. And if you continue using yesterday's property strategy in tomorrow's market, you may end up making a very expensive mistake. Let me explain. Imagine being handed the keys to a brand new apartment located in one of the most desirable areas in Singapore. The MRT is nearby. Good schools surround you. Shopping malls are within walking distance. The location is exceptional. And best of all, the apartment is heavily subsidized. For most people, this sounds like winning the property lottery. But there is a catch. The moment you collect the keys, your financial flexibility becomes restricted for an entire decade. You cannot freely sell the property. You cannot fully monetize it. You cannot treat it as a high-growth investment asset. And even after 10 years, the government still influences who can buy the property from you. This isn't a hypothetical scenario. This is the new reality of Singapore housing. And it forces every buyer to confront a very uncomfortable question. Are you buying a home for stability, or are you buying a property for wealth creation? Because increasingly, Singapore's housing system is making it difficult to optimize for both. For many years, Singaporeans enjoyed something extremely rare, a housing system that provided both affordable shelter and substantial wealth creation. You could buy a subsidized HDB flat, hold it for several years, benefit from appreciation, and eventually upgrade into private property. It became one of the most successful housing models in the world. But success created a new problem. Prime public housing started behaving like investment products. Instead of simply providing shelter, some flats became powerful wealth-building vehicles. As prices rose, the affordability challenge became increasingly serious. If nothing changed, eventually only wealthy households would be able to afford central locations. So policymakers stepped in, aggressively. Today, the emergence of Prime HDBs represents one of the most significant structural shifts Singapore's housing market has seen in decades. At first glance, Prime HDBs seem incredibly attractive. Excellent locations, strong transport connectivity, modern amenities, family-friendly layouts, and substantial subsidies. But underneath these benefits lies a completely different financial framework. The centerpiece of this framework is the 10-year minimum occupation period. Many buyers hear about the 10-year MOP and think it's merely a longer waiting period. It isn't. It fundamentally changes your financial timeline. Think about it. For 10 years, one of your largest assets becomes relatively illiquid. You cannot easily sell it. You cannot fully rent it out. Your upgrading options become limited. Your mobility becomes restricted. Your capital remains locked. In simple terms, your wealth is sitting inside a vault. Now don't get me wrong, it's a beautiful vault. You get a fantastic location, a comfortable home, a great environment for raising a family. But it remains a vault. And during the most productive years of your earning life, that opportunity cost can become significant. This is where many buyers misunderstand government policy. Some assume these measures are temporary cooling measures. They're not. This is a deliberate, long-term restructuring of housing objectives. The government is attempting to separate shelter from speculation. Historically, buyers could purchase subsidized central housing and later enjoy substantial capital gains. Today, that pathway is being intentionally restricted. And here's something many buyers still fail to appreciate. The restrictions don't simply disappear after 10 years. Even after fulfilling the MOP, Prime HDB owners face another reality. Future buyers remain subject to income ceilings. This sounds like a minor detail, but financially, it's massive. Because the mortgage servicing ratio, MSR, caps your monthly housing loan repayments at 30% of your gross monthly income that influence mortgage eligibility. Mortgage eligibility influences purchasing power, and purchasing power ultimately affects resale prices. In other words, if future buyers can only borrow a limited amount, your future resale value may also become constrained, even if the overall property market continues appreciating. That's a major difference compared to private property. There's also another mechanism many buyers overlook: subsidy recovery. When you eventually sell your Prime HDB, part of the gains may be clawed back to offset the subsidies originally received. This means the actual financial outcome could be very different from what many buyers expect. Now, does this mean Prime HDBs are bad? Absolutely not. Far from it. But it does mean buyers need to understand the trade-offs. And ultimately, this creates two very different buyer profiles emerging in Singapore. The first is what I call the shelter-first buyer. This buyer prioritizes stability, family planning, school proximity, lifestyle convenience, space, and long-term certainty. For this buyer, property is primarily a place to live, not a financial instrument. They're comfortable sacrificing some liquidity, some flexibility, and potentially some wealth accumulation in exchange for a higher quality daily life. And honestly, that's a perfectly reasonable decision. Not every property decision needs to maximize returns. Life is not a spreadsheet. Sometimes being close to family, reducing commute time, and creating a better environment for children matters more than squeezing out every dollar of return. But then we have a second buyer profile, the equity-first buyer. This buyer views property very differently. To them, real estate is primarily a wealth-building tool. Return on equity matters, liquidity matters, capital growth matters. They focus heavily on asset progression. And because of this, many eventually move toward private property. Private property operates under a different set of rules. There are no income ceilings, no subsidy clawbacks, no 10-year lock-ins. And most importantly, private property allows leverage to work more efficiently. Let's look at a simple example. Suppose you purchase a condominium worth $1.5 million. You contribute $300,000 in cash. The remaining amount is financed through a mortgage. Now imagine the property's value rises by 10%. The gain equals $150,000. But remember, your actual cash invested was only $300,000. So your return on equity becomes 50%, not 10%. This is the power of leverage, and this is why many investors love private property. When used responsibly, leverage can accelerate wealth creation dramatically. But leverage is also dangerous, because leverage magnifies both gains and losses. Many people focus only on success stories. They see appreciation, they see profits, they see upgraded lifestyles. But they ignore the pressure, large mortgages, interest rate fluctuations, maintenance costs, market volatility, job insecurity. These risks are real. A highly leveraged property strategy works brilliantly during good times, but it can become incredibly stressful during uncertain periods. This is why there is no perfect property path, only different trade-offs. And perhaps the biggest change happening in Singapore today is that the middle ground is disappearing. Historically, many buyers wanted both. They wanted heavily subsidized housing and unrestricted wealth creation. They wanted a central location and massive appreciation. They wanted stability and maximum liquidity. The system increasingly forces buyers to choose, and that changes how we think about housing entirely. Because housing today is no longer just about real estate, it's about identity. When someone chooses a Prime HDB, they're making a statement about their priorities. When someone chooses private property, they're making a different statement. Neither choice is right. Neither choice is wrong. But pretending both produce identical outcomes can be financially dangerous. And this leads us to the deeper question. What exactly is a home? For generations, a home represented security, family, community, belonging. Today, housing increasingly intersects with wealth strategy, financial planning, retirement preparation, and social mobility. Every square foot carries economic meaning. Every housing decision influences future financial outcomes. And perhaps that's why Singapore's housing conversation has become so emotionally charged. Because we're no longer just discussing buildings. We're discussing aspirations, identity, opportunity, and the future. As we move forward, I believe successful buyers will need to think differently. They'll need to move beyond simply asking, "What can I afford?" Instead, they'll ask, "What future am I optimizing for? Am I prioritizing stability or acceleration, lifestyle or liquidity, comfort or compounding?" Because property is ultimately a tool, and different tools serve different purposes. The biggest mistake buyers can make today is blindly following social media narratives, headlines, or peer pressure. The smartest buyers understand the mechanics. They understand opportunity cost. They understand leverage. They understand restrictions. And most importantly, they understand themselves. Because the right property for one family may be completely wrong for another. And in today's market, clarity is becoming more valuable than ever. Before we wrap up, I want to leave you with one final thought. Singapore's property market has changed permanently. The question is not whether the market has evolved. The question is whether buyers have evolved their thinking fast enough to keep up. And that may determine who builds wealth successfully over the next decade. If you found this podcast valuable, make sure to subscribe, share it with a friend who is currently buying or upgrading, and leave a comment below. I'd love to hear your thoughts. Are you a shelter-first buyer or an equity-first buyer? And why? If you're planning to buy, sell, upgrade, or restructure your property portfolio, and you'd like a deeper discussion about Prime HDBs, private property, upgrading pathways, wealth progression, or long-term property strategy, feel free to connect with me directly. I'm always happy to have a meaningful conversation about your property goals and help you understand the trade-offs before making a major decision. Remember, the best property decisions are rarely emotional, they're strategic. This is M.